Hello, my lovely friends, my dear audiences. Welcome to the East-West Show. Check Chow on the East-West with the G&E TV. Local politics, as a matter of fact, more politics than anything else around us. If you compare federal politics and the local politics, federal politics might be big, but they are kind of far further away from you. Local politics, especially our beautiful California, which is said to be going downstream, versus the fact that we used to be, especially got to be your concern. It's your own backyard. Today, in talking about your own backyard, I proudly present to you a candidate for the 29th District, Senate District of California, Mr. Bruce Whitaker, please.
Thank you, Jack. I'm really pleased to be here with you today and I share your concerns about our beautiful California and that it may be trending in a bad direction.
Exactly.
And in order to introduce myself, I'm currently the mayor of the city of Fullerton. I've been on the council for 7 years. It's my second term as mayor. But prior to that, I was a staffer. I worked in the State Assembly office, district director.
I see.
And for several years, I was a senior policy director a policy advisor at the County of Orange. Prior to that, I was an activist and had some victories on behalf of taxpayers.
I see.
And even prior to that, I came more from management, financial management in the private sector.
Oh, I see, I see. This show has no partisanship. We don't take stand. Just for information for my audience, where are you registered?
I'm a lifelong Republican.
All right.
And I was elected 8 times to Republican Central Committee in Orange County. I've served in all the positions there pretty much.
Okay, very good, very good. And of course, I heard a lot from my friend, Maria Maloney. We go back many, many, many years. I take whoever she takes, and I believe that we speak the same language. As long as you share the American value, you're my friend. Otherwise, well, you know, we never met.
Well, you know, it's important to me when I'm choosing someone who I'm going to vote for. It's important to me that they share those constitutional values.
Exactly.
And to me, those are immutable, and it's important. So I agree with you. I think when I take that oath of office, as I've done many times, I take it seriously.
You are right, better be. A live politician, I would say, a lifetime politician, starting at the very bottom, all the way up. Now he's running for the Senate seat for 29th District for California. I believe there's quite a big something going on with the 29th District. So can you do me a favor by briefing my audience about what's going on over there?
Oh, absolutely.
How big is 29th District, please?
29th District covers parts of 3 counties. More of it is in Orange County, but there's some San Bernardino and also Los Angeles County as well. West Covina is really the northwest corner of the district. We also include in that the city of Walnut, Roland Heights, Diamond Bar, part of City of Industry as well. Chino Hills is in San Bernardino County. There are unincorporated areas as well. And then the bulk of it is in Orange County, starting with Yorba Linda, Brea, Placentia, La Habra, Fullerton, 2/3 of Anaheim, La Palma, Cypress, Stanton.
The heart of Southern California, I would say. What's the total population, roughly?
It's estimated now at just about 950,000, so just nearly 1 million people.
Yeah, that's quite a bit already, right? For one district.
1/40th of the state.
All right, good. And there are only 120 of them, but for 1 million people to be represented by one man, that man better be the right man.
Right, and as you mentioned, local politics, that's mostly what I've been involved in, but now this Senate seat would be certainly a little bit larger than local and has statewide significance because right now the majority party has a super majority. They have more than a 2/3 majority. And this seat could be the linchpin if it were to shift back from the majority party to my party. We could help prevent the tax increases that we've been experiencing without voter approval.
You know, my take is that regardless of majority or minority, what we want to emphasize is that California taxpayers majority. right? The taxpayers. So we all heard, I believe, my audience too, up there under the leadership of your district incumbent, lots of happening. So what are happening, please?
Well, Josh Newman is a new senator. He was just elected last November. And he's fairly unknown even in Fullerton. He's a former veteran of military. My information is that he served for 4 years working in the San Francisco mayor's office. So he made promises when he ran for election that he'd be a different kind of Democrat, that he would be a little more fiscally responsible, and he wore a bear costume, and he had a big cutout map of the state of California, and he inferred that if he were elected that he'd take the state back. And now with his voting record, I'm not sure who he's taking it back from and to whom.
Yes.
Because he's been showing through his voting record a very pronounced really San Francisco point of view, something that I think is out of sync with the 29th district.
All right, okay, all right. So speaking of voting record, you know what? Once we elected you guys, and we're kind of like unleashed you, right? So you're on your own. The only handle us as your constituents, as your voter can hold is we keep constantly checking about your voting record. So for the recent gasoline tax, right, car gasoline tax versus the California infrastructure, whatever, which I never believe, I believe he's behind it, right?
Yes, he was arguably the deciding vote on the SB1, the transportation tax package, which is $5.2 billion a year in new taxes. And they've estimated for 10 years, but it really is permanent. It would go on permanently. It can be adjusted upward as well. It was an immediate increase of 12 cents per gallon on gasoline, 20 cents on diesel fuel. And it also included an increase in car registration fees, anywhere from $75 to $250.
So, to your knowledge, do you think Californians would like it? How come we never heard anything?
Well, it was thrown together at the last minute. The legislature is using its power, that supermajority in the legislature, the more than 2/3 that the Democrat Party holds currently. And I agree with you, it shouldn't be about all partisanship, but in the legislature, the numbers are such and the math is such that if one party has that dominant force of numbers, that now even the minority party's ability to represent the other side is very much limited. So it is a team sport in Sacramento. I mean, so much power accrues to whomever is the majority party.
Are you talking about an abusive act of the majority?
Well,
I hate to use the term. I don't know how politically you interpret it.
Right.
It sounds to me that I do have, when I have the majority, I don't have to ask for voters, and let's go decide. Let's cast a vote.
You know, it's a really good point, and I've made that before, that even if you're the majority, a supermajority, you can still do it the right way. Voters in this state expect to have a say in tax matters. And so the supermajority could have chosen to put this on a ballot and let the voters speak. But they chose not to do that. And you're right, it is an abuse. It's kind of straight arming the voters and just saying, we're going to impose this upon you. And I think in this state, and especially in the 29th district, voters are accustomed to having some sway. You know, the Democrats call themselves progressives nowadays, but the true progressives a century ago, they brought into California the concepts of recall, initiative, and referendum. And those were reforms that allow the voters to pull rank on their elected officials, to actually overturn decisions that they don't support.
I see.
And so nowadays, I would argue these Democrats are being regressive, not progressive, because they've taken it the other direction and they're actually reducing the power of the electorate, the power of the voters.
You're right. It's kind of like lots of technicality involved in playing games, I would say. Okay, now, I want to make this declaration to my audiences and to you, of course, as well. I do personally, I mean, as a person, I do have lots of problem with the Republican as a party.
Me too.
I'm not a supporter of the Republican Party. However, I go against anything, anybody, any hand that tries to dig money out of my pocket. I strongly go against that.
Well, I agree with your philosophy because
Especially when my pocket is dug.
yes.
I really even don't know. That is the tragedy.
Well, we pay enough in taxes already, and I'm a big believer in my philosophy. When government expands, liberty recedes. Liberty becomes less.
You're right.
And the whole concept of America, something that's intrinsically American, is to jealously guard our freedoms and our liberty.
You're right.
And today, the real threat is our own government, a government that tends to be rapacious and never gets enough in the way of tax revenues. They stymie our economic freedoms. They take food from the mouths of our children. They take money that could be used for your children's college funds. They reduce your ability to make investments and start small businesses and help your family prosper.
Plus the fact that we Californians, are already taxed to the bones. Are taxed to the bones. We do double taxation, right? And we're notorious. We're notorious in this way that we are doubled. I mean, we are taxed to the bone already. And yet, if there's anything extra, I would just spend it over my wife, my kids, not to the government, right?
Oh, agreed completely.
Right.
And that's what, when I've been involved in politics at every level and as an activist, it's been mostly on fiscal issues and fighting taxes, and I have a track record of success.
So when you say voting record, by checking voting record, his vote was the decisive vote.
For SB 1, the
For SB 1.
transportation taxes.
For the transportation taxes.
Then he also voted for cap
Like
and trade.
like John McCain would say down, like that kind of thing.
Right,
That kind
exactly.
of finger, right?
Exactly.
That kind of thumb. All right, good.
Yep.
For that, we gave him a lot. But you may disagree with you.
Right.
But at least I support that kind of down thumb like that.
Right.
But for this one, this down thumb goes to my pocket.
Right.
Right. I really have a problem. My dear audience, you're not aware of the fact that you are already taxed down to the bone. And yet there is still cutting into the bone to get more juices out, merits maybe, I don't know. Well, to make California rich, make government rich, I know that's not a way to go. That's a totally wrong direction. And that's why I would like to introduce you somebody, a new hand, to replace new man. A new hand probably better than new man. I don't know. I would check with him. Why would he think that he will be a better replacement? And of course, we start with the recall first, right?
Yes.
Let's take a very short moment now. We will be right back. Today with me is my good friend, candidate for California Senate House of 29th District, Mr. Bruce Whitaker. So stay with us. Hello, my dear friends, my dear audience, my lovely audiences, including my friend Linda Whitaker, because her husband is here, and he is the candidate for California Senate House of 29th District, Mr. Bruce Whitaker, and we're sharing his beautiful mind about California and the California politics. We started, unfortunately, with the gas tax that is imposed onto us and the people trying to overturn it. And in the meantime, people are putting together a big movement of recalling the incumbent of 29th District of Senate House of California, Mr. Josh Newman. And that's why my friend, Mr. Whitaker, becomes a candidate. So welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Good. Putting together, number one, is the gas tax overturnable? Number two, is he removable? And why to everybody, to everything, right? Let's start with the gas tax piece.
It's overturnable. There are efforts right now to basically do a referendum to overturn the decision. Hopefully those will succeed, because there was a survey statewide that was conducted not long after the SB 1 taxes were passed that showed that in this left-leaning state, that 58% of Californians oppose this SB1 package.
Okay.
And that makes sense. I know people who will drive many blocks or miles out of their way to save a few cents on a gallon of gas. So this was an extremely unpopular increase.
And the other day when I interviewed Assemblyman Allen, Travis Allen, he mentioned about the signature campaign. It was 365 and 880 signatures, if I'm right, needed to overturn
to qualify for that.
I mean, to qualify for that, so that we will have it put on the ballot for November. Let the voters decide to decide. If they're very willing to say, hey, of course, I would like to empty my pocket to do so. Okay, go ahead, do it, right? So, how much do you know about the signature campaign?
Well, I'm supportive of it, and it is a tall order because those are big numbers in the state. But the dissatisfaction is so large that it is doable. Of course, you have stringent time limits on these things, so everything is a race, pretty much. But this is an opportunity for voters to express their outrage and to show that indeed we can pull rank on those elected officials when necessary.
Okay, very good, very good. I'm very glad to hear that. And I really wish in November I would exercise my right to say yes or no. I would say no. I'm too poor to go ahead and do anything of that kind, right? So now, of course, there is. I know, I understand, especially, or mainly your district, especially the word Orange County is replacing the whole area or representing the whole area. People say in Orange County there is a overall recall movement. Right. So, namely recalling the senator on that seat, though, do you think that's legit?
It is legit, in my opinion. I got my start in activism back when we recalled a majority of Fullerton City Council in '93, '94 over taxes, utility taxes that were imposed without voter approval. And so that was my introduction into local politics. Recalls can be brutal. They can be really intense. But in my opinion, it's the public who is the boss having a review of their representative who they put in office and finding, like you said, thumbs up or thumbs down. We find your performance acceptable or not at this level. So it's eminently fair. And I always say you can't be recalled unless you actually aid that effort. So by his own actions, Senator Newman has brought himself into disfavor and I believe is facing an imminent recall.
I see. So, I mean, in addition to his thumbs up for that Bill 1 Transportation Act, or the whole together, anything else that calls for the recall?
Oh yes, his record has been just a litany of yes on major tax increases. The state is looking right now with the supermajority. They are coming up with creative new taxes virtually every day. In fact, there's a new one, which is a water tax. They're going to tax every connection of water delivery in the state of California. First time ever. I have no doubt that he'll be aboard for that one as well.
I see.
But the really big transgression that followed the SB1 transportation taxes, the fuel increases, was cap and trade. We had an opportunity to end cap and trade, which is an anti-market approach to trying to control carbon emissions. And it's a huge source of revenue for the state bureaucrats. And they wanted it very badly. And Josh Newman was aboard for that as well. And the supermajority passed that, which could lead to about a 70-cent increase in a gallon of gas. So on top of the SB1, now this will be hitting us as consumers in probably early next year.
Yeah, that's why they say starting in January, our registration fee is going to increase also. Right?
Yeah.
There are lots of things, right? In other words, this very incumbent is kind of like losing the trust of the voters in his own district.
Well, I think so, and part of the problem,
which is so devastating. People never do that.
Well, people understand too that even when government takes more money, we don't necessarily see those improvements. One of the arguments in SB1 was the roads need fixing, the freeways and bridges and everything. But that money keeps shifting that direction, but we don't see those improvements. It's in effect we're being held hostage until we cough up more and more money. And in their beneficence, they may decide someday to do a little something. But I know the infrastructure in this state is very lacking. And so here you have the Golden State, this wonderful economy, huge, robust amounts of revenue going to state government, but we, you know, we aren't even in the middle of the pack as far as the quality of our infrastructure.
It probably sounds to me more like a ransom situation. Because we had those measures before, remember?
Right.
Yeah, infrastructure measure before.
To dedicate gas taxes to infrastructure.
Right? And for that, the voters gave a yes. And then where is the money? Where did the money go? Right? So in other words, they can, the infrastructure is kind of the ransom baby, right? In their hands, say, hey, give me money, I'll give you the baby, something like that. And then the money you received, I'll give me more money, I'll give you the more baby, something like that.
And we have dysfunction in Sacramento because the American system of government is offsetting powers, different branches of government, and the ability and competitive, you know, actually locking horns with each other to develop better solutions. But it's also one-sided in this state that you don't really have a functional democratic government. You have a supermajority, both houses of the legislature. You have a governor who's willing to sign whatever they produce and put in front of him. So it's all one way. We become one-way California, and that one way is less and less economic freedom for us, for individuals and businesses, and even visitors to our state.
Oh, by the way, we all talk about in the Western world, you're talking about the pendulum effect, right? Has California ever been on the right, swing on the right for that extent already?
Oh, you know, just back in the 80s, it was looking like there was never going to be an opportunity for a liberal to get elected to state government because the state was viewed as so conservative at that time. So as you say, that pendulum swings back and forth. Part of the burden of being in charge, of actually having the burden of developing public policy, is that then you own it. So then if the results aren't what we like, we'll say out with them. And I think more and more in the middle, that's where elections are being determined. And you're right about when you say Republican, I spend a lot of my time arguing with fellow Republicans who I think are on the wrong track, the wrong course. I think the more freedom path is the one which benefits the most and really inspires our economy. We're in a global economy now, and California has to compete with other states that have much lower levels of overhead when it comes to government, and we compete internationally as well. So when California burdens all of our activities with these unnecessary levies, these taxes, it's really going to hurt us if you project this out. Our competitiveness in this state is really sinking rapidly.
In spite of the fact that they are holding infrastructure as the baby ransomed, look at the infrastructure ourselves, right? And this morning on the way in, I heard a discussion over the radio, learning lessons from Hurricane Harvey, saying that how devastatingly Houston was hurt, and Houston was flat, or so on and so forth. The infrastructure much better than us. Suppose the same thing happens to California, and then the conclusion was California is the least prepared amongst all these other states when something of that elevation or that standard, that magnitude hit us. So where the money went and where would this money go? Those are the questions to be asked.
Well, that's a very large concern, and it's a failure of leadership, and we're all imperiled by that. And we need to adopt better leadership. We need to understand what the real priorities are and take care of them. And infrastructure is job one for government. No one else is going to provide that infrastructure. When it's done properly, it serves all of us. And it's something you're going to pay for now or later. And so the sooner that you make that the priority, but you know what really is the priority in this state? We've had unnecessary escalations of pensions for government employees. And you could argue that all these taxes right now systematically being applied, that they're all hidden pension taxes.
That's all where the problem comes, right? My dear friends, it sounds to me the more we talk, the more I feel that I'm talking to the right people. And that's why I named the show as The Right Man for the Job. The job being the 29th District of Senate House of California, which is right now, and with an incumbent being recalled in the process of it. And we want to finally let the voters say yes or no, up or down for this incumbent, Mr. Josh Newman. And meantime, of course, the beauty of a democracy is that we're never short of hands. We're never short of news sources. So we have different people whose view politics differently. Mr. Bruce Whitaker is one of them. He is the candidate ready for that office. And let's take a very short moment now. When we come back, those previous two segments talking about criticism, and then we're talking about his readiness. How about that? In other words, why you think you are the one, why you think you are ready, how ready, and then what you want to do step by step. All right? Shall we please? All right, very good. We'll see you right away. Hello, my lovely friends, my dear audience, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow Californians. Welcome back to the show. Today is a discussion talking about California, our beautiful California. We want it to be as beautiful as always. We don't even want anything on her face, right? Right. Now, letting alone somebody put a time bomb in her. No, that's too dangerous to do. It's a risky game, right? To join me in the discussion about California is the candidate of Senate House 29th District for California, Mr. Bruce Whitaker. So welcome, sir, back to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be with you.
All right, pleasure is mine, especially with you and I on the same page. I found you to be on the same page. I'm not a supporter for Republicans, to be honest, but I do like your ideology, your take.
Well, thank you. I find that neither party has the market cornered when it comes to certain facts or whatever. It's in the blend of the best ideas coming in a spirit of competition and some cooperation. That's where we can best serve our constituents. So to me, partisanship plays a role in our system, the two-party system, and it certainly does in Sacramento. But beyond partisanship, we need to listen to our constituents, pay attention to the facts. And if you get all the facts on the table, sometimes a decision is a lot easier to make and one that's supportable by all.
And also casting a vote by majority, and that's easy too. But you know, what you really got to listen to what the minority say. Sure. If they really have a reason to say, have some legit, you probably want to consider, right? Anyway.
You want the best arguments from every direction.
Exactly. Really.
Yeah.
So we have been criticizing this district for two segments, especially in the term of we do not have that extra money to pay to go along with the tax, right? And in a sense of that, in spite of caring about your constituents, their pockets, you do something different, right? The SB 01 is really quite a good example, and somebody who casts a decisive vote on that, well, should be held responsible. That's why there's a recall. That's why Mr. Whitaker becomes a candidate. Now I have to ask your readiness. First, I would say, why do you believe that you are the right replacement for the office, please?
Well, you know, I believe I've been preparing for this for many years without really being aware of that. I started as a business executive. I was controller, chief financial manager for a retail company, 125 employees, $20 million a year company. And it was there that I understood how much increasing regulation and taxes were damaging small business formation and small business viability over time. And that got me out of my armchair. I'd always followed politics but hadn't really been active. And I became an activist. And since then, I've had many exploits and many victories in terms of standing up for taxpayers and trying to roll back a government that just tends to want to grow like a weed. That led off at first in my city of Fullerton, where utility taxes back in '93, '94 were imposed without voter approval. I was treasurer and proponent for the Fullerton Recalls Committee. We recalled a majority of the city council. We repealed those taxes, and all these years later, there are no taxes of that sort. It's saved, by my best estimate, $160 million over those years, and that's money that stays in the productive side of the economy and not going to the non-productive side. That led into the Orange County bankruptcy, where I played a very large role. I was chief spokesman of the Committees of Correspondence and led a charge over about a year and a half to protect taxpayers in that, because the immediate response is the county had lost $1.7 billion, largest municipal bankruptcy in U.S. history. And so the immediate knee-jerk reaction is, let's raise taxes and bail them out. But there was the accountability side of this. That would be the wrong thing to reward them for doing the wrong thing. So I helped to lead a very underfunded, we were outspent 30-1 in that effort. But we won at the polls. We defeated Measure R, the bankruptcy sales tax, by about a 60 to 40% amount. And over time, that has saved $3.5 billion for taxpayers, businesses, visitors, residents to our region. So to me, that's the game, or the goal, is to try to keep as much in the more productive side of the economy. And you know, government is overhead. And too much unnecessary overhead starts to threaten. It becomes a parasite that threatens the host at some point.
You're right.
And you talk about California, and I can tell your love for California, and I share that as well. And we have this beautiful state with all of its advantages and such immense wealth capability and the ability to generate even more wealth for individuals and allow prosperity. And we have this parasite of an overgrown government, which is threatening that. It's actually hurting us. And this imbalance in Sacramento right now with people that never solve their appetite for new taxes, that's what has to change. And that's why I'm running for Senate. I have many other in my political resume, too much to cover now, but I have actually proven results on behalf of taxpayers over time. And I think it makes me eminently qualified for this role.
Very good. Thank you for that statement, and also thank you for your readiness. I believe that all that indicates that you are in the area well exercised, well experienced, well accumulated, right? So that you can see things through, right? Now, and are there anybody alongside with you also running for the same spot?
Right now, the only other declared candidates are Joshua Ferguson. He's a local activist in Fullerton. He's never held elective office. He ran for city council. And Ling Chang, who ran the last cycle in November and lost to Josh Newman. And she's a former assembly member, but she doesn't hold political office at present either. I don't really look at it, and there may be more candidates by the time this election is set. And I've always thought there may be at least a handful.
Is it coming November? What?
It's a moving target, because that same legislature that I think is dysfunctional, they're also conniving. They're playing Chicago-style politics. And the legislature is passing new rules about recall and moving the goalposts away from us and actually changing the nature of how recalls are conducted. They're doing it retroactively. This is really wrong. And it was taken, Howard Jarvis Taxpayer Association sued, and it went to court, and the court determined that Howard Jarvis was correct and froze the new rules so they don't apply. Well, the legislature moved immediately again to protect Newman, and they passed new legislation also trying to slow down the process.
And how come this is not on the news?
Well,
people do not know about what's happening.
Well, the news is a willing accomplice for government growth. At least the mainstream media, I think it's pretty, and that's why it's important to try to get information out through shows like yours.
And that's why I can probably help, and that's why my folks over there can help. I'm not necessarily for work for anybody. I'm talking about work for for public justice, right? Okay, now we deserve to get information. For example, I'll give you an example. Last two water infrastructure measures. You look at the language, how blurred those languages were.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Do you really think that this isn't not correct? Well, this is kind of like wrapped up. You're confused, right?
Well,
okay, now the public deserves for the right information. How do you take on that?
Well, you need plain language. You need plain spoken talk from your legislators. They need to take things that are very complex and put them in simpler terms. Often we have an abundance of attorneys as legislators, and things just tend to get more and more complicated. I think one of the reasons why you need more citizen legislators like myself in Sacramento is to be able to effectively communicate to people just what certain actions and impacts are going to have. Like you said, there's a tendency to actually sew in loopholes of every sort and to be able to defeat the will of the people, even when the people clearly express what their will is, that they're actually, again, hijacked in the purpose, and the legislature has its own agenda, and the governor has his own agenda sometimes, and it doesn't comport with that, we serve by the consent of the governed, and they're really our bosses. I tell my wife that. I say when I got elected to office.
Very good. And of course, it's all over majority, right? When the majority decided to do so, and they never use the word to fool around with the voters, but what they did was really something. I felt that I was fooled around. When I look at the language was, probably next time I should bring an example here to indicate the language. It seems to be asking you, do you vote yes or no?
You're talking
that somebody says Jack Zhao isn't a not a good guy.
Right.
I get lost. By the end, I get lost myself, right? And I even forget where I started with. So that kind of thing.
Now I know what you're saying. You're talking about the Secretary of State and the tendency in State Attorney General sometimes to mess with title and summary.
Yes.
As far as anything appearing
and I
on the
believe it's Assembly Travis Allen, he mentioned that about the action itself deserves a lawsuit, and they do a lawsuit about how they wrongly named the bill.
Right.
Am I right?
Right. It's a dereliction of duty, really, because Secretary of State has a ministerial function, and it's very clear. It's spelled out very carefully in election code. And when they play too fast and loose with that, they themselves should be subject to recall because they're violating their core responsibilities of office. And sometimes state attorney generals become involved and they're violating their oath to uphold the law and to maintain a fair system. Our democracy depends on, even when you have partisans or people who are in control, at least being fair, at least on the surface, being fair to help support the public's view of the system.
That's exactly how I view democracy versus the partisanship. Right. So you do have, of course, do have partisanship. In terms of democracy versus the injustice, you really have no partisan line in between. Right. Okay. All right, my dear audience, today with me is my good friend, Mr. Whitaker, Bruce Whitaker, candidate for for a Senate House of California, the one of the 40s for California, Senate District of 29th, to follow to the recall movement to remove Josh Newman out of that office. And I believe that something positive could happen because California deserves only nothing but the best. All right, stay with us. We'll be right back, please. Hello, my lovely friends, my dear audience. Welcome back to the show, you ladies and gentlemen. You are my fellow Californians. Welcome back to the discussion about California as our own backyard. If you're a New Yorker, you don't care about California, exactly like we don't care about New Yorkers, right? We do want to make sure that we are caring about our California, our own backyard. Talking about our California district, Senate District 29, there's a recall going on because lots of people feel disappointed. They lost their confidence in their man they elected for that office. That's 29th district. That's why recall is popping up. The recall movement is going like crazy, and also the signature is going like crazy. I believe before long the signatures will be there, right? So for that we have a friend, Mr. Whitaker, Bruce Whitaker, ready for that office. Candidate for the 29th district, of Senate House of the Senate House of California. Sir, welcome one more time for you to come to the show.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much. It's been for a long time. Our audience hasn't been fed with the information from this site. Right? Let's do it. We know that under Constitution, you have democracy, and then within democracy, and when everybody applies democracy, you have partisanship. When you follow partisanship, you look into a party, you have the left extreme, right extreme, middle of the road within the party. Now you're talking about it, everything goes differently from the starting point, which is Constitution. How do you define differences, if there are, in between or amongst Constitution, democracy, partisanship, and the division of parties? There are a lot of them, 4 layers.
Right. Well, you know, it goes back to our first president, George Washington, who warned of the spirit of party. He understood that we have a role as citizens in our democracy, but he warned that the spirit of party could be the undoing somewhere down the line. So if you ignore your core responsibilities, including that oath to office, to elective office, where I've done it many times, where I swear to uphold the state of the Constitution of the state of California and the U.S. Constitution. And I've always been amazed at elected officials who will do that and then turn around and do violence to those very same constitutions.
Yeah, they violate themselves.
And have no conscience about it, right? So to me, that alone is worthy of being removed from office. And that's why once in a while for the voters to pull rank on their elected and have them stand for a recall, I think is eminently fair. And if someone is doing right by their constituents, they needn't fear a recall. It's only when maybe they've transgressed and they've gone the wrong way. But as you're saying, I think we all have a duty in our democracy to sustain and uphold and not to debase it by looking at facts and saying there are things we aren't going to do. I mean, we have a government in Sacramento right now that's looking very much like a corrupt Chicago-style politics, where it's all top-down and it doesn't matter what the people feel about it. This is the way it's going to be. So it's a very kind of brass knuckles approach.
Okay, once you're in office, what do you want to do to change the culture? I believe the culture is wrong.
Well, I think, first of all, I would be in the minority party. So the raw math of it, it would change the supermajority, so now it would put us on a standing where the voters would have a say in taxes. So that's why this is a linchpin. This seat is very important. It's very important.
In other words, you're
statewide.
minority.
Right, but we wouldn't be more than a 2/3 majority on the other side. So if I flip this seat back, now the voters get a say again. So that's a big empowerment to voters throughout the state of California. So that's why this seat is so important statewide. But the second thing is, my goal would be to help educate and communicate, because we really have to get that pendulum swinging back. We need to talk to constituents about why it's in their best interest to follow certain principles and to reject this kind of criminal enterprise that we're seeing in Sacramento today. And I think it's about putting the adults back in charge.
Okay, very good. Sir, you know, I don't know if I should ask this question or not.
Please do.
It really takes me quite of a hesitation. Should we spare some time to talk about Kelly Thomas of your city?
Oh yes, it's been an important event in my life as an elected official.
Okay.
Yes.
And as you see, my hesitation just now, right? I never prepared. I never discussed with you about this. So what happened with Kelly Thomas, please? You know, from that event, on day 2nd, no, day 3rd, I started with my radio show, talking about it. Till now, I have done no less than 20 shows talking about the poor guy, Kelly Thomas. So what exactly happened to your eye, please?
Well, I was on the council for about 7 months at that stage when this occurred. And I was given false information from our city manager and from the police department on what had occurred the night before. The next morning, I was being told that. And when at first, my tendency was to trust the information, But over time, I saw that I was being given a false narrative. And so I embarked on an effort as council member, as the freshman council member, against virtually everybody else, that the video should be released for the public to see, that the public had a right to judge for themselves.
Okay.
And all sorts of legal obstacles and threats and pressure really ensued from that. But when we finally did get a chance to look at that, when the district attorney released that video and it was out there, the outrage was pretty strong. And you're right, this was a national and international matter in our own city of Fullerton.
Yes.
And I received thousands of emails from all over the world and all over the country. People, you know, were very impacted with what they saw. And you know, we're still dealing with this. We actually have some of those same police officers who were involved are now suing to get their jobs back. And so now we're at 6 years or so in.
Very good, very good. And I might thank you for being honest with me.
Sure.
And I want to be honest with you too. You know the reason why I'm asking? It was to me in my eye, and also among discussion among friends all these years, it came to a point that event becomes a
Pivotal.
typical case that can testify a person's value, value to life, value to justice, or some things like that, right? And of course, the verdict was kind of a shock to everybody. The verdict was kind of going to the contrary exactly how far I can never describe. That's why I started to use that as a test to see where you stand on that. I hope I didn't offend you.
No, and in fact, it was the only thing I could have done, because I take my vows seriously. And so looking at it, trying to develop the best approach to make sure that justice prevailed, so that the public's right to know was guarded, and so that we had an opportunity to learn from and really understand what had occurred here and take the right steps. That's the way I approach every problem. And like I said before, I'm more fiscal-oriented management of government.
Were you
but this was a human.
Were you represent the majority or the minority of your council?
I was in the minority.
You were, and how many were you on your side?
At first, one council member, Sharon Quirk Silva, was coming from my side of the equation, but at one point she decided to run for state assembly, and so she shifted sides and she wrapped herself in the Fullerton Police Department, which was really protecting
I
that
see
side
what you know.
So it wound up pretty much being 4-1 on that. So I was
you're the only one.
Right, right.
You know what? Probably for that only one, you earned yourself a medal, a special honor for being a man with the value that the constituents, the taxpayers, they buy. They buy. All right. Now, after all, we're talking about this, a fact. That guy, Kelly Thomas, had been a landmark for the past 25 years. He's a lunatic. He was incapable of doing anything, including protect himself, right? Suppose he did something wrong. In court, he will be immune because his condition. Am I right? So then when they were chasing him, would that do the other approach, say, hey, let's wait, see till the next day? So was that wrong from the first place?
In my opinion, as I saw the encounter, it just developed in a very bad way. And clearly, in the end, there were 2 reports that came out in the end of the process. Michael Giannacco, who had gotten involved, there was an internal affairs report that was made public, but the real internal affairs report was kept private. And they found contradictory outcomes on that. And one applied to the criminal trial, which actually got the officers away from criminal prosecution. But then in the civil trial, the other one came to light a little bit. So we still have a muddled outcome on this. And I said from the get-go that the most important thing is we couldn't bring Kelly back. Kelly was schizophrenic, as you said. And so he had his issues. And we couldn't bring him back, but the only thing we could do is try to learn something from this. And in the end, we have a muddled outcome because of the lack of clarity that the justice system provided on this.
We can get some justice for the Kelly family, Kelly Tom family.
Right.
And look at the poor father, right? So My dear audience, today I really appreciate the fact that my friend, Mr. Whitaker, opens his mind with me and with the audiences. I believe lots of you who used to write to me about the Kelly Thomas case, including my friend, Attorney Long Ju Liu, and many other friends, attorney friends, Wal Chang, I got a long list of attorney friends who were on my show talking about Kelly Thomas. Now I believe from this man, Mr. Whitaker, justice is served, I believe. At least we want this kind of man to represent us for the district at the Senate House. Can we be better off at least one step, right?
Well, thank you.
We're down to the bottom already. We need 1 inch. Let's move forward 1 inch.
Yeah.
For that kind of mind, I admire, I salute.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Thank
really. And poor Kelly Thomas, well, you know what, you have a mayor that stand on your side, and you have Jack Chow, a show host, stand on your side. May God bless your soul, all right? Okay, my dear audience, we're over time, but I'm very glad, especially the ending, very glad. So thank you for watching, and to my mayor, Mayor Whitaker, and Senate Man Whitaker, Senator Whitaker, and thank you very much for coming here. Thank you for sharing.
I appreciate that, Jack. Thank you.
Thank you.